The snow fell in heavy flakes over Westridge Cemetery, each one a silent witness to grief. Emily Morgan stood rigid as stone, her black dress stark against the white blanket that covered the ground. Three small figures huddled close to her skirts. William, her eldest at 10, with eyes too knowing for his age. Samuel, 7 and silent as shadow. And little Joseph, barely 4, shivering despite the extra layers she'd wrapped him in. "I'm cold, Mama," Joseph whispered, tugging at her sleeve. Emily squeezed his small hand, but couldn't find her voice to answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the freshly carved headstone. Daniel Morgan, 1852-1887. Beloved husband and father. Words too simple for the man. The townsfolk of Westridge stood at a distance, a dark huddle of winter coats and whispers. Emily felt their stares like needles on her skin. "Cursed woman," came a hiss loud enough to hear. "Bad luck follows her," another voice agreed. One by one, they turned away, boots crunching through snow, leaving only the minister who refused to meet her eyes as he closed his Bible. Sheriff Blackwood approached, badge gleaming silver against his black coat. He put a heavy hand on Emily's shoulder, fingers pressing just hard enough to hurt. "3 days, Mrs. Morgan," he said, voice low. "Harrison Wells wants you gone from Westridge by then." His eyes narrowed. "Don't make me come looking." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy and walked away, leaving the Morgan family alone with their fresh grief in the falling snow. 3 miles away, Jack Hawkins knelt before 2 modest graves. The headstones were simple wood carved by his own hands. Marie Hawkins, beloved wife. Thomas Hawkins, cherished son. 3 winters had passed since he'd found them frozen, yet the pain remained raw as a fresh wound. Jack placed 2 small wildflowers he'd preserved through the winter months on each grave. His weathered hands, once strong enough to uphold the law as sheriff, trembled slightly. "Snow's coming again, little man," he said softly to Thomas's grave. "The big kind, like you used to watch from the window." The wind answered, whistling through the pines surrounding his isolated ranch. Jack looked up at the iron-gray sky, heavy with the promise of more snow. 3 years since the blizzard that had claimed his family while he sat drinking in town, oblivious to the danger until too late. 3 years of living as a ghost on his own land. Rising from his knees with a grunt, Jack pulled his coat tighter. The Colt Peacemaker at his hip, the gun that had won him 3 shooting competitions, felt heavier these days. He walked to his bay horse, patting its neck before mounting. Time to check the boundary fences before the next storm hit. On the ridge above his property, Jack paused, raising his field glasses. Through the lens, he spotted them. A woman and 3 small boys struggling to build a cabin as winter closed in. He should have kept riding. Wasn't his business. Wasn't his problem. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the woman stood after the canvas tore free from the roof. How she didn't scream or cry, just picked up the hammer again. Maybe it was the boys huddled together like wolf pups in a den that wasn't yet finished. Or maybe it was the way she suddenly fell to her knees for just a moment, head bowed, before pushing herself up again. Jack lowered the field glasses, his jaw tightening. He'd seen that kind of determination before. In Marie's eyes, the winter she tried to save their son. He turned his horse toward the valley. Wasn't his business, wasn't his problem, but he rode down anyway. Emily heard hoofbeats and spun, gripping the axe. A shadow fell across the half-built cabin. A man sat tall on a bay horse, hat pulled low against the wind. Instinctively, she positioned herself between the stranger and her boys. "William, take your brothers inside," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "But Mama..." "Now, William." The man dismounted but kept his distance, seeming to understand her fear. He removed his hat, revealing gray-streaked dark hair and a face weathered by sun and sorrow. "Name's Hawkins," he said, voice low and rough from disuse. "Jack Hawkins. Looks like you could use some help with that roof." Emily's spine went rigid. We don't take charity. Ain't charity. His voice was steady, matter of fact. It's trade. I got timber needs hauling. Your boy looks strong enough. He nodded at William, who had stubbornly remained at her side. William straightened, puffing out his thin chest. I can work, sir. Emily's eyes narrowed. Why would you help us? The whole town thinks we're cursed. Jack's gaze didn't waver. I don't put much stock in what towns think, ma'am. The wind howled. Samuel peeked out from the doorless cabin, shivering. Joseph coughed behind him, a wet, whirring sound. Jack noticed. Without comment, he unsung a roll of canvas from his saddle. Thick oilcloth, the kind that cost more than Emily had seen in months. He set it on the ground between them, not so close as to threaten, not so far as to make her come to him. I'll be back at first light with proper tools, he said, mounting his horse. Get those boys inside before the snow gets worse. Wait, Emily called. I don't even know you. Jack looked back, his face half-shadowed under his hat brim. No, ma'am, but I know what it's like to lose everything and have nowhere to turn. He rode away, leaving Emily staring at the heavy canvas in her hands. William came to stand beside her. Is he going to help us, Mama? Emily looked at the canvas, then at the darkening sky. I think so. Why? Samuel called from inside. Emily had no answer for that. Or perhaps she did, having recognized the same haunted weight in Jack's eyes that she carried herself. Grief. Guilt, the kind that didn't wash off. That night, in the drafty cabin with more gaps than walls, Emily lit their last candle. The boys huddled under blankets, their breath misting in the cold air. Joseph's cough had worsened, each spasm racking his small frame. When the younger boys finally slept, Emily took out her journal, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling. She wrote by candlelight, her hand trembling slightly. Daniel, you were right about this town. If they knew the truth about your death, they would... She stopped, tearing out the page and holding it to the candle flame. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Mama. William's voice came from the darkness. He sat up, watching her with eyes too old for his face. You should be sleeping, she said softly. If Mr. Hawkins knew about your dreams, would he go away too? Emily set down the pen and moved to sit beside him, drawing him close. They're just nightmares, William, that's all. But both knew this wasn't true. William had been there the morning she woke screaming 3 days before Daniel's death, had heard her describe to his father in terrified detail a vision of him falling from Echo Ridge with a wound in his back. Daniel had laughed it off, had gone hunting anyway. From his bedroll, Joseph coughed violently. Emily moved to him, feeling his forehead with growing alarm. He was burning with fever. He needs medicine, William whispered. I know, Emily replied, her voice tight. But they had no money and no one in Westridge would sell to her anyway. Not to the witch woman who saw deaths before they happened. A month passed. Under Jack's guidance, the cabin took shape. Walls sealed against the wind, a sturdy roof overhead, a stone fireplace drawing smoke clean and true. Jack arrived each dawn and left each dusk, teaching William and Samuel how to swing a hammer, how to split logs, how to mend tools. Joseph recovered slowly with herbs. Jack gathered himself, medicine he'd learned to make after losing his own son. The boy now shadowed Jack constantly, clutching a small silver toy pistol Jack had carved for him. One evening as Jack cleaned his Colt by firelight, Joseph approached with his silver toy. My pa gave me this before he went away, the boy said. He said it's special. Jack examined the intricately carved silver pistol. Your pa was right. That's fine craftsmanship. Emily watched the exchange from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Later, when the boys slept, Jack asked, the silver pistol, Daniel made that? Emily nodded. He was good with his hands. She hesitated. You hold your rifle like you've seen war. Jack's hands paused momentarily. War between the states, Pennsylvania's 7th Regiment. He didn't elaborate, but the set of his shoulders told stories his words didn't. William says you were sheriff once. Jack's stillness was answer enough. People talk, even to the cursed widow, she added, attempting lightness but not quite achieving it. What made you leave the job? She asked. Jack looked out the small window to the distant smoke of Westridge. I buried my wife and son 3 winters ago. Blizzard took them while I was in town. The simple words carried the weight of mountains. Emily didn't offer empty condolences. Instead, she asked, How old was your boy? 6. Jack's voice roughened. Thomas was 6, loved horses, wanted to be a rancher like his grandpa. They fell silent, each lost in private memories. Finally, Emily spoke again. Daniel didn't fall from Echo Ridge by accident. Jack turned to her, eyes sharp. No? Emily looked down at her hands. I saw it happen before it did. In a dream. Jack didn't laugh or dismiss her as others had. Tell me, was all he said. 3 nights before it happened, I dreamed of Daniel falling. There was a man with him. I couldn't see his face, but I saw a silver badge on his chest. Her voice grew bitter. In the dream, this man pushed Daniel from the ridge. I saw the wound in his back. Did you tell anyone? I told Daniel. Her voice cracked. He said I was being foolish, that dreams weren't prophecies. He went hunting anyway. And after? Emily gave a hollow laugh. Tell Blackwood I'd seen his badge in a dream before my husband died? The town already thought I was strange. That would have sealed it. So you kept quiet. I took my boys and tried to live. She met Jack's eyes. Then Daniel's land deed was suddenly lost at the county office. The bank called in loans I never knew we had. Your husband found something on his land, didn't he? Jack's voice was quiet. Something valuable. Emily's eyes widened slightly. How did you know? Because Harrison Wells doesn't drive people off their land for sport. He does it for profit. A silent understanding passed between them. Emily might be labeled the Witch of Westridge, but Jack Hawkins had secrets of his own and a growing determination to uncover the truth behind Daniel Morgan's convenient accident. The following week, Jack ventured into town. The usual morning crowd filled the general store. Conversation stopped when he entered. The storekeeper, Henry Miller, crossed his arms. Heard you've been spending time with that widow Hawkins. Jack laid coins on the counter. I need flour, coffee, and medicine for a child's cough. Henry didn't move. Can't sell to you if it's going to her. Jack's jaw tightened. He swept the coins off the counter, grabbed what he needed from the shelves, and laid down more than the fair price. I'm buying these things for myself, Henry. What I do with my own property isn't your concern. Outside, Harrison Wells waited by his horse, elegant in a wool coat despite the cold. Hawkins, he greeted, tone pleasant but eyes cold. Been a while since we've seen you in town. Jack secured his purchases to his saddle. That woman's poison, Jack. Wells lowered his voice. The whole town knows it. Her own husband couldn't get away from her fast enough. Jack turned slowly, hand resting near his colt. Meaning what exactly? Wells shrugged. Just saying Daniel Morgan was making plans before his unfortunate accident. Plans that didn't include her. Strange he'd confide such things to the bank owner and not his wife. Men talk business with businessmen. Wells smiled thinly. You keep this up, helping her, and you'll lose whatever standing you have left in this community. Jack mounted his horse. I already lost everything that mattered to me, Wells. 3 years ago. He leaned down, voice dropping. This is me trying to find it again. As he passed the doctor's office, he noticed Rebecca Wilson watching him from her window. Unlike the others, she offered a small nod. Jack reined in and dismounted. Dr. Wilson was 60, her hair steel gray, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She ushered him inside without preamble. "The little boy has pneumonia, I expect," she said, selecting medicines from her cabinet. "Shame on this town, letting a child suffer for their superstitions." "You've treated them before?" Jack asked, surprised. "When I could. Emily brings them to me at night sometimes." She handed him a small bottle. "2 drops in water, morning and night, should help with the fever." Jack reached for his money, but she waved him off. "I don't charge for doing what's right." She fixed him with a penetrating gaze. "You should know that 5 people have died in accidents on silver-rich land in the last 10 years, all properties now owned by the bank or the mining company." Jack absorbed this information slowly. "You're sure of this?" "I certify the deaths, Mr. Hawkins. I know exactly how many broken necks and hunting accidents this town has seen." Her voice hardened. "And I know what a bullet wound looks like, even when it's been made to look like something else." That night, while Jack was at his ranch checking his ammunition supplies, riders came to Emily's cabin. 8 men, faces hidden by bandanas. Emily heard them and pushed the boys behind her, reaching for Daniel's old hunting rifle with shaking hands. William took it from her. "I'll do it, Mama." "William, no!" But he was already at the door, lifting the heavy gun. The riders circled the cabin. One shouted, "You got till morning, widow. Leave or we'll burn you out." William opened the door, rifle raised. "My pa died protecting us. I won't let you hurt my mama." One rider laughed. "That pop gun ain't gonna stop us, boy." He dismounted and walked toward the door. William fired into the air. The man stopped, then lunged forward and shoved William hard. The boy fell, cracking his head against the doorframe. Emily screamed, rushing to him. Blood ran down his temple. The rider grabbed Emily by the hair, yanking her head back. "You listening now?" His breath was hot on her face, reeking of whiskey. "You got till dawn." He shoved her away and remounted his horse. They rode off, laughing into the night. Emily held William, rocking him as tears streamed down her face. Samuel and Joseph clung to her, sobbing. William's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I'm sorry, Mama. I couldn't stop them." Emily stroked his hair, careful of the wound. "Shh. It's all right. You were very brave." Suddenly, Joseph sat bolt upright, his eyes wide and distant. "They're coming back," he whispered. "Tomorrow night, with fire. I can see them." Emily and William exchanged alarmed glances. The boy had never shown signs of sharing her gift before. When Jack arrived the next morning, he found them huddled by the fire. William's face was bruised, a crude bandage around his head. Emily's eyes were hollow, defeated. Jack's blood turned to ice. "What happened?" Emily couldn't speak. William, voice shaking, told him everything, including Joseph's strange prediction. Jack's fists clenched. "I should have been here." Emily looked up at him, eyes red. "Are you sorry? Or are you leaving? Because that's what everyone does. They say pretty words and then they leave when things get hard." Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the boys, at Emily, at the cabin they'd built together. Then he thought about the riders, about the town, about everything he'd lose if he stayed. "Maybe," he said quietly, "maybe they're right. Maybe I am making things worse for you." Emily's face went cold. "So you're leaving, just like everyone else?" Jack couldn't answer. He turned, walked to his horse, and rode away into the gathering dusk. But he wasn't fleeing. He was hunting. Before he left, Jack had noticed something about Joseph's silver toy pistol, a thin seam along the barrel that shouldn't have been there. Now, as the night fell, he returned to his ranch with a purpose that had been missing from his life for 3 years. In his cabin, Jack pulled out his old sheriff's badge, the silver tarnished from neglect. Beside it lay Daniel Morgan's journal, which Jack had found beneath a loose floorboard in the Morgan cabin weeks ago. He hadn't told Emily, wasn't sure if it would bring her comfort or pain. He opened it now, reading Daniel's last entries. November 10, found more silver. Vein runs deeper than I thought. Wells offered to buy again. Doubled his price. Still too low for what I know is beneath our feet. November 12, Blackwood came by today. Says Wells wants to compromise. Meeting him at Echo Ridge tomorrow. Not telling Em. She's been having those dreams again. Says she sees me falling. The final entry, dated the day of Daniel's death, was just one line. If anything happens to me, the full map of the silver vein is hidden in Joseph's silver pistol. Jack closed the journal, jaw tight with anger. He'd been right all along. Now he needed proof and allies. Caleb Jenkins wiped down the bar of the Frontier Saloon, watching Sheriff Blackwood and his deputies drink at their usual table. Blackwood was laughing, the silver badge on his chest catching the lamplight. "Another round, Sheriff?" Caleb asked, tone carefully neutral. "Keep them coming, Jenkins." Blackwood grinned. "We're celebrating tonight." "That's so. Got rid of a problem that's been plaguing this town too long." Blackwood tapped his glass for a refill. "By this time tomorrow, that witch woman and her brats will be gone, one way or another." The saloon door opened, bringing a gust of cold air. Jack Hawkins stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders. The room went quiet. "Evening, gentlemen," Jack said, walking to the bar. "Whiskey, Caleb, the good kind." Caleb poured without comment, sliding the glass across the bar. Jack took a long swallow, then turned to face Blackwood. "Heard you paid a visit to the Morgan place last night," he said, voice carrying in the silent room. 8 men against a woman and 3 children. Real brave." Blackwood's face darkened. "Mind your business, Hawkins." "Funny thing about being sheriff," Jack continued as if Blackwood hadn't spoken. "You're supposed to protect people, not terrorize them." Blackwood stood, hand resting on his gun. "I'm protecting this town from bad elements. That woman's cursed. Everyone knows it. That woman has a name, Emily Morgan. And she's building a home for her sons after her husband died in what I'm beginning to think wasn't an accident at all." A heavy silence fell. Blackwood's deputy, young Miller, shifted uncomfortably. "You calling me a liar, Hawkins?" "I'm saying Daniel Morgan was an experienced hunter who knew Echo Ridge better than anyone. I'm saying he found silver on his land and refused to sell to Wells." Jack's voice hardened. "I'm saying that's a mighty big coincidence, him dying the way he did." Blackwood drew his gun in one smooth motion. "That's enough. Get out, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace." Jack didn't move. "On what charge exactly?" "How about threatening an officer?" Blackwood cocked the hammer. "One more word and I'll add resisting arrest." Jack set down his glass slowly. "I'll go, but this isn't finished." Blackwood. Outside, Jack mounted his horse, fury and purpose burning within him. He rode not toward his ranch, but toward the town's edge where Caleb Jenkins lived in small quarters behind the saloon. When Caleb returned home after closing, Jack was waiting. "Tell me about Daniel Morgan," Jack demanded without preamble. Caleb sighed heavily. "You're stirring up trouble, Jack. Dangerous trouble." 5 people, Caleb. 5 accidents on silver-rich land in 10 years. Caleb's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "Dr. Wilson keeps count." Caleb poured 2 drinks, his hands slightly unsteady. "I've kept quiet too long. I saw Blackwood leave town with Daniel that day." He took a deep breath. They rode toward Echo Ridge together. Jack felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. "You're sure?" "Saw them with my own eyes. Thought nothing of it until Daniel's body was found." Caleb looked down at his glass. By then, Blackwood had already ruled it an accident. Who was going to question the sheriff? "Why tell me now?" "Because they're going to kill her, Jack. Wells and Blackwood. They're not just going to run her off. Wells has given the order to make sure she never tells what she knows." Jack stood, checking his Colt. "I need to get back to the cabin." They're planning for tomorrow night, Caleb said quickly. During the storm, when no one will hear or see. Then we have work to do, Jack said grimly. Round up anyone who's lost someone to Wells' schemes. Tell them to meet at the Morgan place before sundown tomorrow. And Caleb, bring guns. As dawn broke over Westridge, Robert Stevens, a clerk at Wells Bank, rode hard through the snow toward the Morgan cabin. Emily, who hadn't slept, opened the door with rifle in hand before he could knock. Mrs. Morgan, Stevens said, removing his hat, I've come to warn you. They're coming tonight. Wells, Blackwood, all of them. Emily's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would you help us? Stevens looked ashamed. My sister's boy was Marshall Wilson, third name on Wells' list. He pulled out a folded paper. This is what finally convinced me to act. Emily took the paper, unfolding it to reveal a list of names and dates. Every accident victim on land Wells wanted, Stevens explained. 5 families in 10 years. Daniel Morgan was the latest. While Emily studied the document, Jack returned, his face grim but determined. Without a word, he strode to Joseph, kneeling before the boy. Joseph, he said gently, may I see your silver pistol? The boy hesitated, then handed over his treasured toy. Jack examined it carefully, finding the nearly invisible seam along the barrel. With deft fingers, he twisted the barrel, and it opened like a locket, revealing a tightly folded paper inside. What is it? Emily asked, moving closer. Jack unfolded the paper carefully. It's a map, he said, spreading it on the table. A detailed survey of the silver vein running under your land and half the valley. Emily stared at the map, understanding dawning. This is why they want us gone. This is why Daniel died. Jack nodded grimly. And this is what will stop them. Throughout the day they prepared. Jack distributed weapons from his own collection to the Allies, arriving one by one. The Wilson family, Widow Patterson, whose husband had fallen from a loft, the Sullivan brothers, whose father had died in a mining accident. Dr. Wilson arrived with medical supplies and grim determination. Time someone in this town stood up to Wells, she declared, loading a shotgun with practiced ease. By dusk, they had positioned themselves strategically around the Morgan cabin. 11 determined souls against Wells' coming force. Emily worked alongside them, loading ammunition, her face set with determination. As they prepared, Joseph tugged at Jack's sleeve. I dreamed about you, the boy said simply. Jack knelt to the child's level. What kind of dream, partner? You were standing in the snow protecting us. Joseph's eyes, so like his mother's, held a certainty that unnerved Jack. And lots of people were standing with you. The whole town. Jack glanced at Emily, who had gone still at her son's words. From your lips to God's ears, partner, Jack said, ruffling the boy's hair. By dusk, the storm had begun. Snow fell in thick curtains as Harrison Wells led 15 armed men toward the Morgan property. Jack, Emily, and their 11 allies waited in silence. This ends tonight, Jack said quietly to Emily as they watched the approaching riders. One way or another. Wells dismounted first, his expensive coat stark against the white snow. Hawkins, he called, I know you're in there. Come out and be reasonable. Jack stepped onto the porch, rifle at his side. Nothing reasonable about 15 men coming to threaten a widow and her children, Wells. Wells smiled thinly. This is a legal matter. The Morgans are squatting on bank property. They've defaulted on their loans. Funny how those loans appeared after Daniel found silver, Jack replied. We know what you've been doing, Wells. We know about all the accidents. We have the map, Emily added, stepping up beside Jack, Joseph's silver pistol in her hand. Daniel's map of the silver vein, the one he died for. Wells' smile faltered. You have no proof of anything. We have Daniel's journal. Jack nodded to Stevens, who stepped forward with the document. We have Stevens' records of payments from your private account to Blackwood following each death. We have witnesses who've kept silent too long. From the darkness behind Wells, young Deputy Miller stepped forward. Sheriff, I didn't sign up for this. Shut your mouth, boy, Blackwood snarled. No, sir. Miller removed his badge. I won't be part of hurting women and children. Two more deputies followed suit, stepping back from Blackwood's side. Wells' face contorted with rage. Cowards, he spat. Ungrateful, spineless. His tirade was cut short by the sound of more hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. All eyes turned to see a second group of riders cresting the hill, at least 20 strong, led by Henry Miller from the general store. What is this? Wells demanded as the newcomers drew closer. Jack felt a smile tug at his lips as he remembered Joseph's words. Everyone, the whole town was standing with you. Henry pulled his horse to a stop, looking uncomfortable but determined. We heard there was trouble at the Morgan place. Thought maybe more witnesses might be needed. Behind him, faces Jack recognized from town nodded in agreement. Shopkeepers, farmers, even the blacksmith, with his massive arms crossed over his chest. Wells' face had gone pale with fury. This is sedition. I'll have every one of you ruined for this. No, Wells, Jack said quietly. What you're seeing is a town reclaiming its conscience. In that moment, Wells snapped. He drew his pistol and fired at Jack. The shot went wide. Emily, without hesitation, raised her Winchester and fired. The bullet struck Wells in the shoulder, spinning him around. Chaos erupted. Blackwood drew his gun, but instead of aiming at Jack or Emily, he shot Wells in the back. If I'm going down, I'm not going alone, Blackwood shouted as Wells collapsed face first into the snow. Silence fell like a weight. Blackwood turned to the stunned crowd, his laugh bitter and hollow. Wells ordered it all. Paid me to take care of Morgan when he wouldn't sell. His eyes found Emily's. I killed your husband, ma'am. Pushed him from Echo Ridge when he refused to sell. He tossed his badge into the snow. Shot him first, though. Clean through the back, just like the lady dreamed it. His wild gaze swept the crowd. She does see things before they happen. That part's true enough. Several men moved to restrain Blackwood, but he didn't resist. As they bound his hands, he looked at Jack. You were right to quit when you did, Hawkins. This badge, it twists a man when there's money behind it. The confession sent ripples of shock through the crowd. From the cabin doorway came Joseph's small voice. I saw this too, Mama. The bad man telling the truth. Emily knelt beside her youngest son, drawing him close. Then you saw justice, Joseph. That's a better vision than mine ever were. 3 months later, spring came to Westridge. The snow melted into burbling streams that fed the awakening earth. The Morgan cabin stood sturdy and complete, smoke rising from the chimney in the cool mornings, windows gleaming in the strengthening sun. Blackwood was sentenced to hang. Wells, recovering from his wounds, received 20 years in territorial prison. The properties wrongfully seized were returned to their original owners or their surviving families. The silver mine on the Morgan land operated under fair practices, with profits shared among those who had suffered from Wells' schemes. Young Miller, now wearing the sheriff's badge, had ridden out to the Morgan place as his first official act, apologizing for his former silence in the face of corruption. William shadowed him whenever possible, learning about law and justice from a better example than Blackwood had been. On a particularly fine spring morning, Emily stood in her garden, transplanting seedlings. She thought of Daniel, of his dream for this land that he hadn't lived to see fulfilled. She thought of the winding path that had brought her here, the fears, the losses, the unexpected allies turned to friends. And she thought of Jack Hawkins, who had appeared in their darkest hour and stayed through the storm. He still lived at his own ranch, maintaining propriety, but spent most days helping with the Morgan place. The boys had grown attached to him, especially Joseph, who followed him like a shadow whenever he visited. As if conjured by her thoughts, the sound of hoofbeats announced Jack's arrival. Emily straightened, brushing soil from her hands as he rode into view, his figure silhouetted against the morning sky. He dismounted, leading his horse to the water trough before approaching her. In his hand, he carried a small wooden box. "I've been thinking," Jack said after they'd exchanged greetings. "My place is too big for just one person. Too many empty rooms." Emily's heart quickened. "Is that so?" He nodded, still watching the boys rather than looking at her directly. "And this cabin, fine as it is, will start feeling crowded as those boys grow. William's nearly as tall as you already." Jack's hand found hers on the rough fence, his fingers intertwining with hers with careful deliberation. "I thought perhaps we might consider combining household," he said, "if you were amenable." Emily turned to face him fully. "Are you proposing Jack Hawkins?" Now he did look at her, opening the wooden box to reveal a simple gold band. "I'm not trying to replace what you had with Daniel or what I had with Marie. Those bonds remain sacred." "I know," she said softly, "but I've come to care for you, Emily, and for those boys." His voice roughened with emotion. "More than I thought possible after losing my family. You've brought me back to life." From the porch, Joseph called out, "Say yes, Mama. I already saw it in my dream." Emily laughed, the sound bright in the spring air. "It seems my son has visions of his own." She met Jack's gaze. "Yes, Jack Hawkins. Yes to all of it." As autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson, a wedding took place on the combined Hawkins-Morgan ranch. The entire town turned out, the previous divisions healed through shared purpose and truth. Jack stood tall in a new black suit, William proudly at his side as best man, wearing the deputy badge Miller had given him as a gift. Samuel and Joseph sat in the front row, fidgeting in their Sunday clothes. When Emily appeared in a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, Jack felt something settle in his chest. Not the erasing of old grief, but the addition of new joy. That evening, as lanterns glowed across the property and the town celebrated with food and music, Jack found Emily standing slightly apart, watching as William taught several town boys a game he had invented. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Hawkins?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, shaking her head. "No, just marveling at how much can change in a year. For the better, I hope. Infinitely." She turned in his arms to face him. "When Daniel died, I thought our story was over, that the boys and I would always be running, always be outsiders." Her smile was radiant in the golden lantern light. "Now we have a home, a real home." The first snowflakes of winter began to fall, gentle and clean. Jack looked up, remembering another snow, another time. The dread he had felt at the sight had transformed, like so much else. "Look, Mama," Joseph called, running up to them. "It's snowing, like in my new dream." "What dream is that?" Jack asked, kneeling to the boy's level. Joseph's eyes sparkled. "The one where we're all together, and nobody's afraid anymore." He threw his arms around Jack's neck. "And you're my pa now, just like you promised." Jack held the boy close, looking over his head at Emily and the other two boys who had joined them. Not his blood, not his name by birth, but his family all the same. "That's right, partner," Jack said, voice rough with emotion. "Just like I promised." The snow continued to fall, no longer a harbinger of death, but a clean page upon which to write their shared future. A future built on truth, justice, and the courage to stand together against the darkness. For in the end, that was the real silver found in these mountains. Not the ore beneath the ground, but the bonds forged in winter and tested by fire. Bonds that would endure long after the snow melted into spring.